Hello, Manchester, and welcome to another edition of Girard at Large. I am your got caught turning my phone off host, Rich Girard. Thanks for tuning in. As you know, you can find us online at girardatlarge.com, and you can find us on Facebook and Twitter, also at Girard at Large. Well, we encourage you to like us and to follow us. Why? Well, if you were tuned in on election night, you saw that we had results coming in from all over the city before they were reported anywhere else. And we also had results from some of the neighboring towns. It's kind of interesting to, let's talk, shall we? So, what do we know about Donald Trump's win here in New Hampshire? Well, he won, and it's pretty interesting to see how the numbers played out. Apparently, the Republican primary set records with over 320,000 people pulling a Republican ballot. The interesting thing about that is only about half of the people who voted in the Republican primary were, in fact, Republicans, and of those, Donald Trump scored more than 70% of the vote, according to exit polls. What's an exit poll? You may ask. Well, that's when people stand outside of a polling place and talk to people as they leave. Are you a Republican? Are you a Democrat? Who did you vote for? Etc., etc., etc. And they come up with demographic information, age, race, gender, and all of that fun stuff. And it would seem that 3 out of every 4 people who voted for Nikki Haley were not Republicans. Most of them were independents, but a strange thing was discovered in one of the polls. Roughly 8% of the people who voted for Nikki Haley were declared Democrats. Now, you may ask, how can that happen, Rich? Well, you can switch your registration here in the state of New Hampshire from Democrat to Republican or Republican to Democrat or either party to undeclared before a certain point in time when an election is coming. You can't do it at the polls, and you can't do it after that certain point of time, which this year was October 6th, I believe. And that date is a subject of controversy, as there are some who are accusing either the governor or the Secretary of State of artificially extending that date beyond what it should have been, which they say is sometime in June. But since we really don't know what we do know is that somewhere near 4,000 Democrats re-registered as Republicans before that deadline. I don't have a number for how many of them re-registered as independents, and they did so with the sole purpose of coming into the Republican primary and trying to upstage Donald Trump. So when you take a look at the fact that Nikki Haley got what she wanted, a mano-a-mano race with Donald Trump, when you take a look at the fact that she got the one-on-one, which I always thought was a stupid thing for her to want, because just about everybody else in the field, save for Chris Christie, the number 2 choice of their voters, whether it was Ramaswamy or Doug Burgum or Ron DeSantis, who despite withdrawing still got almost a full percentage of the vote. All of those votes went to Trump. Christie's votes went to Haley. So those other people pulling out and leaving it Haley v. Trump was not a good thing for Haley. At the moment DeSantis pulled out, there was no doubt that Trump was going to win. The question was going to be by how much. And now we know. Statewide, it was just a shade more than 11 points. Here in the Queen City, it was 15%. I'm still waiting to see what the R's, D's, and I's were. Hopefully, I can get that information from the city clerk's office soon. I know they're busy post-election. But now that they've got those electronic registration things where they scan your license and register you there, I'm told that I should be able to pretty much instantly get the breakdown of who turned out to vote. And once I do, we'll do some analysis on that. But the upshot is this: Donald Trump stormed through the city of Manchester by more than 15 points, give or take, and took the state of New Hampshire after an enormous investment of time, effort, and energy. Tens of millions of dollars. Our smiling governor and his relentless pursuit of dethroning Donald Trump, etc., fall for Haley. And it was kind of fun to watch because if you were paying attention to the campaign, they went from Haley's going to win one-on-one to, well, they call it lowering expectations. She just needs a strong second place. I don't know. Is losing by 11 points a strong second place? I personally wouldn't consider it to be a strong second place, but what do I know? But don't you worry. I have the article right here. I do. For those of you, it's kind of funny, right? It's not bad enough that the union leader, which also hates Donald Trump, was not exactly straightforward in its coverage. But now, despite NH win, Trump lost ground with some voters. And they compared what he got for independent votes in the state in the 2020 general election to what he got for independent votes in the state in the 2024 primary, where Haley, a variety of special interest groups or PACs, the governor were actively, openly, and relentlessly soliciting independents to vote for Nikki Haley against Donald Trump, which, if you believe the exit polls, they did by a sizable margin. But so we're going to compare two entirely different elections to make it look like that Trump, who won in a record turnout, somehow is failing to attract voters. And that's one thing I never understood in this whole electability garb. Trump can't win. Really? Well, he lost suburban women. I'm trying to figure out, how does one go from getting 62 million votes to 75 million votes, lose suburban women or anybody else for that matter of fact? That math just blows my mind. That's a massive increase in the popular vote that he got from 2020 to 2024. Which voters exactly did he lose while increasing his overall voter count by roughly 25%? Things that make you go, But don't you worry. Wall Street donors keep Haley's 2024 run afloat, even if voters won't. So where does the campaign go from now? From here, for those of you who are interested, it goes to South Carolina, her sweet South Carolina. Yes, where the governor, the lieutenant governor, the attorney general, speaker of the House, president of the Senate, almost every Republican member of their House and Senate, and a variety of other, both United States senators, almost every U.S. congressman is behind Donald Trump against their former governor, Nikki Haley. And according to the Real Clear Politics poll average, Trump is more than 30 points ahead of Haley in her own state. So she's got the two-man race that she wanted, mano a mano with Donald Trump. She's going to get shellacked in her home state, and along the way, make it all of the money. Of course, a lot of Democrats, Democrat organizations, Democrat billionaires are funding Nikki Haley and her PAC, or the PACs supporting her. Why? Because they want to tie up the Republican Party in a primary as long as possible so that they're wasting money on each other and not going after Joe Biden. And Nikki Haley, who claims to want to defeat Joe Biden, is not exactly doing what's necessary to further the cause at this point. From Super Tuesday, of course, she's not even on the ballot in Nevada, so Trump will win Nevada. Then we go to South Carolina, where Trump is going to wipe her out in her home state, and then you go to then you go to a bunch of what are called closed primaries, where Republicans only can vote throughout the South and other places in the country. It's called Super Tuesday, where she's not. So what ultimately is the point? So, all right, that's my riff on the federal stuff. The New Hampshire election, Manchester, very Trumpy by state standards, apparently. 15 point win for the former president here. Okay, back on to the local stuff, and boy, are we locked and loaded for things tonight. First, I've got some budget numbers for you. Yes, I do. Budget numbers. We were talking last week about what the tax cap increase can be here in the city, and the perennial confusion between how much you can raise in new property taxes and what the quote-unquote tax rate is going to be. And people say, oh, well, the CPI average for the last 3 years is 5.63%. That means the property tax rate can go up by 5.63%. No, it doesn't. It means we can go from raising $237 million $751,486 in property taxes, which is what the city raised for the current budget year, to raising $251,136,876 for the next fiscal year. That's the budget that Mayor Rothe is now working on. It's a $13.4 million increase in the amount of new property tax revenue that can be generated under the tax cap. And a number of things will affect the tax rate, from spending to non-property tax revenues to the value of the tax base. So let's not lose it. And not for nothing, boys and girls, in my $237 million number, that's the tax warrant. It's called the tax warrant for the current budget year. I did not include the $12.2 million appropriated in taxes for the county, because you see, when you go and pay your property tax bill, you pay what's called the municipal part of the tax, which is what goes to fund, your roads, your police, fire, and all that fun stuff. You pay the local school tax, which goes to fund your schools. You pay the state education tax, which goes to fund your schools, and you pay the county tax. So there are actually four pieces to your property tax rate. And so when I do the tax cap calculations, I never count the amount of property taxes raised and given to the county, because that's not a number that the city controls. We get a bill as a city from the county and we have to pay it. And so it's technically not subject to the property to the tax cap. So when I do the tax cap calculations, I back that number out because to do so reduces the amount of money that you can raise in new taxes. If you do it the way the Board of Mayor and Aldermen traditionally does it, they'll count that $12.2 million and they'll say that they can add another $700,000 to that total, which would mean that they could raise $14 million more dollars. And rest assured, I have every confidence that all $13 to $14 million, however you calculate it, that can be spent by the Board of Aldermen will be spent by the Board of Aldermen. And it's not so much that I am worried about what the Republican aldermen are going to do. In fact, I'm fairly confident that the Republican aldermen are going to be, fiscally conservative aldermen. I'm not so sure about the mayor, who continues to turn a blind eye to the rampant spending problems in the school district, all the while being silent about various things that are coming forward on the city side. And one of the things coming forward on the city side, which the Republican alderman on a committee killed, was a request by the fire department to apply for a grant that would fund 12 new firefighters at the fire department. Chief Ryan Cashin, in his quest to expand his domain. Now, look, back in the 90s, I kind of feel like I should have a cane and a gravelly voice and a much longer beard. By the way, if you want to weigh in on the Fu Manchu, the goatee, what's our number here? 603-640-3091. Maybe we'll do an informal poll. I've given it to the end of the month. We're not quite there yet. Does it stay? Does it go? Do you like it? Let me know. But back in the 90s, when I used to work on budgets, among other things, for the mayor's office, there were changes at the fire department. And those changes have been in place for now 30 years. We eliminated a bunch of district chiefs. There were reductions in staffing. There were a variety of changes, and the city has lived with those changes literally for 30 years. And now comes Chief Cashin saying, I have to have more assistant chiefs. I have to have more deputy chiefs. And he's, doing what departments do, reclassifying things, giving people who are in the job a pay raise to essentially do the same job, and adding to the number of administrators. Oh my God, it's like the schools. We got all of the fewer kids we have, the more people we need working out of the district office. Now he's coming in and saying, well, we need at least another 12 firefighters because every piece of firefighting equipment should have not one, not two, not the 3 that they have, but 4 people working on a truck. Well, that's kind of the way it used to be back in the 90s, and now it's not that way, and it hasn't been that way for a really long time. And they say, I get it. Well, 4 people can do the job faster than 3 people can, and that may, in fact, be true. Sometimes, you got too many people, you know what they say. But, in the discussion of this, is there ever any conversation about what kind of calls the firemen go out on? I mean, honestly, the last time I looked at the numbers, literally 3 out of every 4 times or more, a big red truck was called to the scene. It wasn't called to the scene of a fire. It was called to the scene of an ambulance. Maybe an accident, but whenever an ambulance gets dispatched in this city, a big red fire truck goes along with it. Okay? Sometimes they get there faster and they want, it saves lives. I'm not saying they shouldn't do it, but what I'm saying is maybe, now, I grew up in the 70s and the 80s. Remember Emergency 51? Was it Emergency 51? With, what were their names? Oh, I'm getting old. But, and of course, every time the paramedics were dispatched to John and what was the other guy, they'd get in their modified pickup truck with all of the supplies and equipment or whatnot, in the cases that were put along the bed. They'd get there, they'd always call Rampart Hospital. They'd talk to Dixie or, I forget the doctor's name, Kelsey and whatnot. And they were always sticking lactated ringer, needles with lactated ringers in somebody's arm. Anyway, so they didn't send out the great big fire trucks to do an ambulance call. They sent a couple guys, paramedics, out to do the call. So why do we still insist in the city of Manchester sending $1 million fire truck out to go, out the door to go to an ambulance call? Now, I'm pretty sure that we're still sending those fire trucks out at least 3 out of every 4 calls for that purpose. So why do I need 4 guys on a truck to go to an ambulance call when that's the vast majority of the calls that they're dispatched to? Yes, I understand that there may be other calls that are actual fires that require, crews and equipment, but they'll dispatch, just like they have for the last 30 years, the number of people that they need to dispatch. The problem with this grant is it funds the positions for 3 years, and then after 3 years, that $3 million pickup goes straight to you, the taxpayer. And over the years, there have been any number of grant-funded positions that the feds have given us money for that, of course, once you have it, you can't get rid of it. And that's one of the problems you're going to have in the upcoming budget, unless Mayor Rothe finally grows a set and decides that, like the 13 people that were hired for community, what were they, community nurses, or people that would be dispatched to calls that weren't worthy of the police department's time. Well, how many people are on the COVID money for the school district? Oh, that's right, 63. Adrienne Boulogne, yes, she's grant funded, and that was extended with the COVID money, but that's coming to an. You take a look, Adrienne Boulogne, our director of homeless initiatives. All of these positions are going to Jody Nazaka, the economic development director, right? Oh my God, we can't not have an economic development director. I'm not knocking the woman. I don't know her. I don't know what she's done, but I'm not getting the sense that there are an awful lot of things happening in the city of Manchester that someone can point to and say, without that position, we wouldn't have that $20 million building. The only thing I see that she's done is come up with criterion for the Board of Mayor and Aldermen to evaluate the 79E tax breaks that they give developers. And oh, by the way, another big one may be in the works, as the developer that's developing the apartments on Central Street where the old Athens restaurant was, is now looking at another parcel of land, and of course it's in a development zone, which entitles it to tax credits. So you're going to get a $3 million piece of property, get a $40 or $50 million overhaul, and they're going to pay taxes on that $3 million property for the next 5 years while you, the taxpayers, subsidize it. Yes, we keep doing this stuff to ourselves, but okay, so let's just say cash in, and from what I understand of the grant, right, they can ask for 1, they can ask for 101, but Cashin's looking for 12. Cashin's looking for 12. Okay, that's once the grant goes, you, the taxpayers, are going to pick it up because, of course, those 12 guys are going to be totally indispensable here in the city of Manchester. But a funny thing happened is a group of Republican aldermen on the committee that was vetting the request voted no. And that got the Democrats' hackles up, including former fire chief Jim Burkish. I don't know. I kind of think if you're a former fire chief, you got a conflict of interest when you're voting on things having to do with your former department. But that's just me. But, and then, of course, it brought accusations. Now, I like Pat Long a lot. And I get along well with Pat. But when I start reading articles about him accusing the Republicans of not thinking and walking in lockstep and not voting their conscience and being told what to say, not for nothing, Pat. And this idea that, Republicans are bringing things in under new business that, should be on an agenda. Oh, you mean like the $100,000, like the pay raise for the mayor that went from $68,000 to $100,000 that was brought in under new business without any warning or notice to anybody? Turns out that apparently the promise of increasing the income of the mayor's office, the salary of the mayor's office, was to entice Kevin Kavanaugh to run because he wasn't going to leave his union gig, which pays him a pretty penny, for the $68,000 that the mayor of Manchester makes. So once he knew that was going through, he voted for it. It went through, and now Rothe is getting paid $100K. I'll bet you didn't know that, but that's one of those new business items. So this idea that because the Republicans are saying, we got to start looking at what the budget impacts of all of this stuff are once the grant disappears, lockstep, not told what to do. That's certainly not a way to gain any cooperation. And by the way, if we're going to talk about cooperation and collegiality, what exactly was the rationale for every Democrat on the board voting against a motion to make unanimous the election of Joe Kelly Levasseur as chairman of the board? And not for nothing, I think it's kind of funny whenever the mayor refers to Levasseur, he calls him Chairman Levasseur. That's pretty much a new thing where the mayor refers to the chairman as the chairman, but okay. Whatever. It's just silly. So the fire department. Oh, and also on, also looking to expand. You watch, mark my words. It won't be long before you see Cashin and the fire department come forward with a proposal to bring the ambulance service back in-house, which financially will be a total train wreck for the city. There's a reason why it got privatized years ago. The city is a lousy collector of ambulance bills and fees. The private sector knows how to work insurance, knows how to collect balances. They have a profit motive. They have a stay in business motive to do it. Nobody's complaining about the service that is being rendered by AMR, although AMR should not be the ambulance company. We tread over that ground over and over again. Nobody complained about the service that Chalk was providing, or Rockingham, or any of the companies that have provided it over recent years. But the taxpayer has been able to keep those dollars in check without the liability. No one's complaining about the quality. If you think they're going to be any better under the city with union firefighters manning the ambulances, you got another thing coming. It's just not going to happen. All right, so Couple other notes before we get to some of the key things we're going to discuss tonight. Yes, annual homeless person count in Manchester kicks off today. That today being, today. So this is the thing they do every year. Once a year, they go out and they count the homeless people. Do you ever trust them to get this thing right? Oh, yes, we went out and counted the homeless people. It's really not that bad. There are only 126 in the whole city of Manchester, yet we've got multiple shelters full. We need engagement centers. We've got encampments all over God's creation. And then when the numbers, come out, they always refer to it as a fixed point in time. They never collect any useful data, and if they do, they never share it. And that useful data would, where do you come from? No, you don't ask them where they came from, because they'll say Manchester. Everybody gets wise to that shtick, but you ask them questions about what high school, elementary school, middle school they went to in Manchester. You ask them things that if they grew up here or they had any remote association here, they'd know. Pretty simple. So we'll see what that yields. And by the way, if you want to go back and take a bit of an historic look at the stats, you can go take a look at the information that I published at girardformayor.com back in 2021. That's all still up there. I give you all the data, and I think part of the reason why they don't collect or share the data that they used to collect and or share is because some of us made great hay with the fact that literally, more than 3/4 of the people on our streets by the city's own admission weren't from the city, and most of those weren't even from the state of New Hampshire. So, when you start to drill down and take a look at who is really involved with, vagrancy on our streets, you come to find out that they really aren't people from Manchester. Just an update, our Nancy Rothe, our assistant principal at Hillside, who was so drunk one night she peed herself on a ride home in Londonderry, got pulled over and charged with DWI, or is it DUI, or whatever it is. Well, she had her day in court yesterday and pled guilty not to driving while intoxicated, which blows my mind given what the officer's report contained and the fact that she refused a breathalyzer test, thus losing her license for 6 months. She pled guilty to reckless driving and had another 60 days without her license tacked on to the 6 months she earned herself when she refused the breathalyzer test in September, and has to pay fines totaling $645. Of course, the oppressed a principal who is so poorly paid here in the Queen City, and not for nothing, principals, assistant principals, if they're not at six figures, they're damn close. Well, she pleaded with the court for an additional 90 days to pay her $645 fine. I wonder if she's trying to clear up her bar tab at the restaurant in, what was it, Methuen? No, not Methuen. I forget where it was. I wonder if she's trying to clear up her bar tab before she pays her fines. And, reckless conduct. I told that to an attorney. They were amazed that the judge went that light. Okay, so also in court, thanks in part to a Manchester school district employee, Tina Kim Philibot. It's funny because Tina Kim Philibot likes to brag about how she went through Manchester schools, and she tells a very different story about how she was oppressed and stereotyped, et cetera, by her teachers because she's Asian. Then some of her teachers who have reached out to me to say, I had her in class. Let me tell you this about her. Apparently she didn't like doing her homework and didn't understand why getting zeros was bad. And all of these math classes she claims that she was put in by the schools because she was Asian and stereotyped as someone who either liked or was good in math as a result. Yeah, I heard from one of those teachers who said, the classes she was in, like any other student in an honors level class at this, and I'm not going to say which level of school it was in, But yeah, required parental. The parents were notified because it required their permission to be there because the class was advanced. Okay? Yeah. Well, she is part of a group of people suing the state of New Hampshire over the law that was passed back in 2021 that prohibited teachers in any classroom in the state of New Hampshire from teaching, and I quote, "It bans teaching in elementary and high schools that any individual by virtue of his or her race and sex is inherently racist, or the teaching that one race or sex is inherently superior to another." This is called, the law was called the Divisive Concept Law, and it was introduced and adopted by the state legislature and signed by the governor because of CRT, critical race theory. And look, we're kind of going back to the future here on the critical race theory, but critical race theory is in fact a legal theory or a social justice theory, if I can put it this way, that basically says if you're white, you're an oppressor. If you're not white, you're a victim of white people. If you're straight, you're an oppressor. If you're not straight, you are a victim of oppressive straight people. If you're Christian, you're an oppressor. If you're non-Christian, you're a victim of the the oppressor Christians. If you're white, straight, Christian, and oh my God, male, if you're male, you're inherently an oppressor. If you're a woman, you're inherently a victim. So if you're white, Christian, male, and straight, you are the most evil thing in society because you are so racist, you don't even know how racist you are. So it creates a class of oppressors, multiple classes of oppressors, multiple classes of victims, and it asserts that the superiority of one over another, because if you don't assert the superiority of one over another based on an immutable characteristic, based on your race, your sex, your religion, your gender, if you don't control that. Well, I guess you control your religion, but if you don't control your race, although I guess today you can control your gender. I don't know. I realize the amount of gray in my beard has caused me to realize that I am in fact a cretin, perhaps even a dinosaur. But I know, because I went to public school in Manchester, that there are two genders. I know there is male. I know there is female. I know that you can't have reproduction without male and female. You can't have reproduction without sperm and egg. You can't, it's the way it is. Okay? So, I went to public school. Whew, I could be wrong. But, so it takes these immutable traits and it assigns them characteristics of oppressor or victim of oppression, and it labels everybody accordingly. So it doesn't matter. You could be the most non-racist person on the planet. If you're white, you'll be considered racist. You can be the most racist person on the planet if you're black or Latino or of color, as the popular saying now goes. It's impossible for you to be racist. And what critical race theory does, it's all what undergirds this thing called systemic racism. Cops are racist because they arrest more people who are of color than they. No, we don't look at the data. We don't look at the calls for service. We don't look at the encounters. We don't look at any of the actual data except the pieces of data that make the point that we want to make. All right? And critical race theory, which is in the Manchester School District, which is in school districts across this state, teaches, remember I showed you the slides, whiteness is power. That was a training that was required by the Manchester School District to be given to personnel back in 2021. They denied it. I got the evidence. I got the training seminar. I published it. You can get it at girardatlarge.com. You can watch it for yourself. I got everything. Don't tell me it's not happening. Well, because it was happening in Manchester and because it was happening across the state legislature essentially passed a law that said you may not, as a teacher in the state of New Hampshire, stand in front of a classroom and say, if you're white, you're racist. If you're not white, you're oppressed. If you're male, you're superior. If you're female, you're inferior. You can't teach that kind of hate and bigotry in our schools. That's what the law says. Well, now they're calling it the Banned Concepts Law, and they're saying, oh, it's constitutionally unvague. Teachers, it's chilling free speech because teachers don't know if they can talk about slavery, or they can talk about LGBTQ issues, or they can do this, or they can do that. Or quoting Tina Kim Philibot, we have dedicated our careers to creating an education community where every student, including Black, brown, and students of color, students from the LGBTAIQ+, or I screwed up the letters, community, students with disabilities, and students with other historically marginalized identities feel like they belong. Question. How does any kid feel like they belong if they have a teacher standing up in front of their classroom telling them that if you're of a certain race, a certain gender, or, you do certain things in the bedroom, you're inherently inferior or superior to other people who don't have those same characteristics? This is crap. This unconstitutionally vague law disallows students from receiving the inclusive, complete education they deserve. What, they can't have an inclusive, complete education from a teacher who doesn't stand up in front of the class and accuse you of being racist if you're white and a victim if you're black? Doesn't accuse you of being sexist if you're male and and oppressed, and oppressed if you're a female? Accuses you of being intolerant if you're straight and hated if you're not straight? I mean, when you read this stuff, it's discouraging public school teachers from teaching and talking about race, gender, disability, and LGBTQ plus identities inside and outside of the classroom. Folks, that's horse crap. The fact, not only are the state's teachers unions, but you have your own school district personnel in Tina Kim Philibot looking to throw out a law that says, and I quote, a law that, quote, bans teaching in elementary and high schools that any individual by virtue of his race and sex is inherently racist, or the teaching that one race or sex is inherently superior to another. So in other words, a teacher can't up there and say, you know what, if you're black, you're not as good as the white people. If you're white, you're a racist. If you're straight, you're oppressive. If you're LGBTQ, you're better than others or not. So in other words, disallowing teachers from imparting a biased, bigoted value judgment on somebody based on their skin color, their sexual orientation, or their gender is depriving our children of an education. And you wonder why school districts like Manchester, who adopt these policies that defy that law, lie to parents, keep secrets from them, continue to see enrollment decline. So that's in your courts. And it's not only in your courts, it's in federal court. And alarmingly, a federal court judge declined to dismiss the lawsuit because he's concerned about the constitutionality of the allegedly vague statute. Now, the Attorney General's office has issued guidance on this vague statute, which makes it pretty damn clear what you can't do. And it doesn't say you can't teach about slavery. It doesn't say you can't teach about the what people who owned slaves or what slaves themselves. It doesn't say you can't teach history. It doesn't say you can't teach what they thought, what they said, what they did. It means you can't stand in front of the class and say, if you're white, you're inherently racist. If you're not white, you're inherently a victim of an inherently racist, systemically racist system. It doesn't let you do that. I don't know. Do you have a problem with that? I don't have a problem with that. 603-640-3091 if you'd like to chime in. Okay, so I want to follow up on an issue that I talked about last week because I think it's important. Before I talk to you about what happened at the Zoning Board of Adjustment, we had Kathy call in from the Zoning Board of Adjustment. Oh, before I get to that, I want to talk about the school board. I'm going to get a lot of people really upset right now, and they deserve it. But I did not get a chance to go and testify before the school board and talk about the $17 million they're spending on modular classrooms that could entirely renovate the Wilson School, Beach Street School, and the two schools that actually got the lowest scores. Well, I guess Hallsville got the lowest score, but that's close. But the two other schools that scored lower and significantly so than Wilson School in the 2021 facility study, Gosler Park and Smith Road School. For that $17 million, you could do everything that 2021 study recommended for those four schools. Okay? But that $17 million contract, by the way, never should have been entered into. All right? Having once upon a time chaired what's called the Joint School Building Committee, once a project is approved, any contracts associated with that project have got to go through the Joint School Building Committee, which is a joint committee of the Board of Aldermen and the Board of School Committee. There are 3 aldermen on the committee. There are 3 school board members on the committee. They choose amongst themselves who the chairman is, and they review any and all contracts, bids, and anything else that go out to the public in conjunction with a project that has been approved. That $17 million contract to buy those modulars, and that's not a Manchester thing. That is a state law. That is statutory. That's a standing committee. Okay? And now they're scrambling because and I understand that there are 2 more large contracts that have been approved because the school board apparently either has waived or is just simply ignoring the requirement that any contract over $50,000 must be approved by the school board. Okay? That is their policy. And in fact, I'd have to go back and take a look at the procurement code in the city charter, so I'm not going to go that far yet. But, those contracts, having once upon a time chaired the finance committee, make their way through the committee process. It goes to finance. Finance reviews it, drills down, does the hard work, and then makes recommendations to the Board of School Committee, and boom, it goes through. No, these contracts, we got to move too fast. We got too much to do. We can't bother with the process that's designed to make sure the elected officials are holding accountable the appointed officials, and the voters have an opportunity, the citizens have an opportunity to take a look at the agendas, see what's on them, and come and share their comments and thoughts or otherwise raise whatever questions or concerns they may have. No, we're going to fast track everything and blow it. We're only going to blow away the normal process. We're going to blow away the legally required process and enter into all of this stuff before the school board, before the Joint School Buildings Committee even convenes. But I guess they're convening tomorrow, Friday, hastily arranged organizational meeting called by the ever on top of things, Jim O'Connell's on top of this one like a box of donuts. Yes, he is. So they're not even following the statutory process to review and approve these contracts before they go out the door. So it's a total cluster. They're intentionally moving things as fast as they are. Come to find out, one of the things that Pat Long complained about, or the school the school board, Jim O'Connell complained about, was this motion under new business that was attacking children because it wanted to pause the process so the the new board of aldermen, the majority of which has not seen a presentation on these things, could to get a handle on what's going on. Well, it turns out, I've learned, that several aldermen asked Mayor Rothe multiple occasions to hold a special meeting just to go over this issue. And he refused. Now, those aldermen, I believe 3 or 5 aldermen in writing can call a special meeting. But the mayor refused. And so the aldermen apparently felt like they had to bring it in under, of course, the mayor controls the agenda too, right? I don't know. I'm a little unclear as to whether or not it was put on an agenda and removed by the mayor, so I can't say that happened. But figuring that the mayor refused multiple requests to hold a special meeting so that the board could review this $300 million project, they brought it in under new business because they figured that was the only way it was going to get a hearing at the board. Pretty sad when you're already into the first meeting or two of the year of the term, and already people who are, we want to have transparent government, except we won't hold any meetings to have to provide the opportunity for elected officials to air their concerns and ask their questions. I have a feeling that knowing that the aldermen were pushing for this meeting might have motivated the school board or the school administration or both to fast track a big expensive contract like $17 million for portable classrooms to facilitate the construction. They say, no, well, there are penalties there. We're going to have, okay. Well, you know what? We got a lot of schools to renovate. So maybe we should, since we spent $17 million, maybe we should shut them down one by one and, go from stem to stern and get our $17 million out of those. Oh, wait a minute. We bought them instead of leasing them. So I guess we could just sell them again. Yikes. So that's what's happening at your school board, boys and girls. Rules? They are for you, not for them. Okay, so we need to visit this sober home application out on Holt Ave. Kathy called in at the beginning of last week's show. She shared her horror what was going on. As of that point in time, I'd only talked to people about the meeting. I had not yet watched it myself. Now that I have, I got to tell you, I'm horrified. I'm horrified. So one thing I do have to correct, because as you know, when I make a mistake, okay, I had been told, doesn't matter who told me what, I have this rule that basically I need to verify things, and I didn't, so bad on me. But after the vote to approve failed, the zoning board was told by the staff that, nope, you have to, whatever gets done, it has to be done by a majority vote. And I sat there and I thought about it for a second, saying, well, there was a majority of people who said no to this motion, but they said, well, you have to vote in favor of a motion. And so if you want to decline this or you want to reject this application, there has to be a motion to reject the application with whatever finding of fact you come up with. So the initial vote took place, and then the conversation continued because the people who were against it, for some reason, couldn't come up with a motion to articulate why they were against it, and there was and it went from there. Now, the way the meeting was handled, and generally speaking, I'm a fan of Ann Ketterer, who is now the zoning board chairman. She is abrupt, and she can be brittle. But generally speaking, the times that I've been before the board, I've believed for her demeanor that her questions and her comments have typically been, spot on. So I say that because I was shocked by how prejudicial she was in that hearing, and how ham-handed she was with the public. So frustrated was the public after that meeting that the crowd literally erupted in anger. There were people shouting. There were people asking questions. That it was not a pretty scene. And I don't fault the residents because they, in my opinion, had every reason to be angry. Because when one of them would pipe up while someone was saying something, after the public hearing was closed, she would smack them down like a 3-year-old who was, about to put his hand or her hand or their hand or whatever pronoun you want to use, hand, on a hot stove. Okay. I cringed every public session's closed. She was rude. She was abrupt, and she wasn't picking up what was happening in that room. And she was totally deaf to it. This is a conversation between the board and the applicant now. Public session's closed. You don't do that with members of the public. You don't do that with taxpayers. You don't do that with abutters who are there because they're concerned about the value of their property, the safety of their children, and the quality of life in their neighborhood. And they have reason to be concerned about that with this variance application. So she didn't handle it well, and she was pushing. She was pushing to change the votes of the no's, at least one of them to yes, because she clearly wanted this project. And alongside that, whether it's because the mayor got to her or whatever the case may be, but alongside that, June Trisciani kept talking. Okay, June Trisciani is an alternate member of the Zoning Board of Adjustment. Alternates only sit on cases when there is a vacancy, or I should say, only when there's an absence of a regular or a full. They're called full board members. Okay, so if one of the 5 full members that were there weren't there for any reason, or there was a conflict and they removed themselves for consideration, then and only then would an alternate sit on the case. Now, you have to understand that members of the Zoning Board of Adjustment are effectively judges, okay? So to have her not just asking questions, because she really wasn't doing that, but to allow her to participate in the discussions, to allow her to present a point of view and to, frankly, advocate for the variance is highly inappropriate and totally improper. Now, there may be members of the Zoning Board of Adjustment that are leaving either if for any reason an alternate now needs to sit on this case, which will be appealed, okay, she has now prejudiced herself. She, by her conduct on the board, at some points at the invitation of the chairman. So when they're going, criterion by criterion and doing these straw poll votes, which is bizarre. I've never seen that happen before. Who believes it meets criterion 1? Put your hand up. Who believes it meets criterion 2? Put your hand up. They went through all 5 criterion and did that until they zeroed in on the one criterion that one guy had reservations about that they thought they could flip, and then it was a full-on attack. His name was Joe. I forget the last name. And he was right. He was like, well, we have to determine whether or not this is in the public interest. Well, the public is out here saying it's not in our interest. Well, thanks to some crafty questions from the chair and, answers by the applicant, he went, they're like, well, you can't just take a look at the public as the immediate area affected. You have to zoom out and you have to look at the benefit to the entire city and to the entire state. And what it means for the public health, safety, and welfare, not just of the people who are impacted, but so many people beyond that. And that was enough to flip this guy's vote. So in other words, they got him to look past it not being in the interest of the neighborhood to being in the interest of the city and the state to get him to say, oh, yeah, now I guess I see your point. I agree it's in the public interest. Oh, can I have a motion? Can I have a motion? No sooner did he say that than she was asking for a motion again to approve. that's not, I mean, clearly they were fishing for a way to flip those votes. Now, I don't know why the three folks who voted no didn't just put forward a motion to deny it. I mean, I understand, and I appreciate the fact that they were conflicted, that they thought they had, there are things they were supportive of, but things they weren't supportive of, and they weren't sure what the best thing to do was, blah, blah, blah. I get it. But legally, in order to grant the variance, the application has got to, in the minds of those 5 people sitting there, has got to meet all 5 of the criterion. 4 out of 5 is not enough. It's not majority wins. It's 100%. And they were terribly disrespectful to the public. Now, as someone who's gone there and had people say, I'm opposed to this, but I'm going to yield my 3 minutes to Mr. Girard, because that's happened in these cases. These sober home cases where neighbors have asked me to speak on their behalf because they're not speakers, or they're afraid, or they live right next door and they don't want to, be in the line of fire, so to speak, whether that's a justified fear or not. And so one of the first speakers was an attorney who's like, yeah, I'm here to represent several people. No, you have 3 minutes. Because he asked if he could go beyond the 3 minutes, and they said, well, what if people cede their time to me? And several people in the audience said, yeah, he can have my time, he can have my time, he can have my time. Let the people speak through the person they want to speak through. Nope, not going to do that. Only 3 minutes. What a horror show. There was one guy at the end of the meeting, like, nope, public's closed. I just have a question. The question is, how come you continue to engage with the applicant? How come you continue to give them every opportunity to answer your questions, prove your points, and ignore those of us who are trying to get your attention, who want to rebut what they're saying so that we can have our say on what's going to happen in our neighborhood beyond the 3 minutes you give us? The planning board staff answered that one saying, well, I'm not going to come up with an answer that's satisfactory to you, so I'm not going to bother to answer it. That's almost word for word what the guy said. It was a horror show. There was a fellow, I think his name was Ben Adams, who was representing several neighbors. He spoke very, very well, because part of the thing they were saying is, well, this is actually going to be better for the neighborhood than many of the uses that could go into this property based on the zoning. And part of it was, they could have tractor trailer trucks going in and out of there. Well, listen, if you've ever been through that area, which I have been, and Mr. Adams, I think his name was, brought this up saying, tractor trailer trucks can't get down those roads. They won't make the corner from Holt to Waverly. It can't be done. And if anyone, and for anyone to say that it could means they don't know what they're talking about, as clear as day and as honest to God as I'm sitting here in front of you. As soon as he said, well, anyone said they don't know what they're talking about, I'm 90% sure it was Ann Ketterer, but it could have been June, but June was having so many microphone problems, she was all, well, it's funny how fast you forget you got to push the button for your microphone, because she kept talking without her microphone. But as he no sooner said, people who say that tractor trailers can go through there don't know what they're talking about. Somebody came out and said, you don't know what you're talking about either. I'm 90% sure it was the chairman. I was so stunned by that. I rewound it twice to listen to make. That is the level of disrespect that was shown to the people at that hearing, who weren't kooks, they weren't crazy, they were raising very valid points about the concerns that they have. Personally, I happen to think that the applicant did a decent job presenting the case for why they should get the variance. I do. I'm not saying I would have voted for it, but I think they did a decent and respectful job. But, and I don't have time, but one of the questions that was out there was whether or not this was a congregate living facility or a halfway house. Well, the fact of the matter is everybody who comes through Dismas House, I love the terminology that they use now. They're all women who have been involved with they are justice system involved women. That means they're coming, once they've done their time, they're coming to and I'm not dissing Dismas House. But the fact of the matter is there were reasons why they were asking some of the questions that they were asking. There are things in here about clinical services. What does that mean? Who is it to? What is the population that's going to be in the neighborhood? And it also comes to my attention that somebody tried to buy that property to put up houses and were rejected in favor of this application. So the idea that no one was interested in buying the property, I have on pretty good authority, is false. There's something not right in how this was handled for sure. And there's something not right when you're looking at marketing materials that are talking about a fundraising campaign to renovate the property that they hadn't even gotten a variance for yet. When stuff like that happens, there are reasons for questions, and I hope the neighbors raise some of this when they go back and ask for a rehearing. I am your ever humble host, Rich Girard. Thanks for tuning in. Until next week, be good, be well, don't do anything we wouldn't do. We're proud to have in the audience. Thanks so much for being there. Good night.